Here is my story. Before my wife and I became a thing, we had always been family friends. Her mother was a close friend of my mom, and they used to come around our house a lot when she was a child. My wife and I did not get along so well as children because I used to tease her a lot, but when we became adults, a lot changed. Seeing her often contributed to me falling in love with her, and months after that, we started dating. According to my wife, I was her first real love, and the rest of her college relationships were just her testing the waters. When we started dating, we told our family about us, and they approved of our relationship because she was no stranger to our family. But before we married, we had a serious fight that led to us nearly breaking up. So, there's this cousin of mine that had been my rival since I was a child. He was my maternal cousin, a couple of years older than me. My mom's younger sister had him when she was 16, while my mom waited till 21 to have me with my dad. I can't explain why, but my cousin and I always fought or struggled for something. No matter how our mothers tried to force us, we never seemed to get along. He was also a low-key bully who constantly bullied me all the time, but he'd act well-behaved whenever he was with our parents or any adult around. What caused my wife and me to nearly break up was my wife, who was my girlfriend then, made out with him at a family reunion we had, and when I caught them, I was so mad. She knew he was my rival, yet she didn't push him away when he made advances at her. She allowed him to kiss her, which nearly destroyed our relationship. It took me about 3 months for us to make up after that fight, and that was after I looked at things from her angle and realized that she was strongly under the influence of alcohol. Now that I share this, I wish I ended things with her then. Maybe she wouldn't have caused me so much pain after all those years. After my wife and I married, we moved to the state where we worked and only visited our hometown on holidays and important occasions. We were both happy with our lives and lived below our means. Already, we knew kids were not coming into the picture yet, so we never talked about children. In the end, I tried my best to be a great husband, and I supported my wife financially, emotionally, and spiritually, and in the other wheels of life, she needed my support. Aside from our families, we were all we got. Between my wife and I was the person who only visited our parents on special occasions or invitations, but my wife tried as much as she could to visit our hometown at least twice a month. Her mother was very sick, and as the only child, she needed to go back and spend some time with her. On some of the weekends she visited her mother, she would sleep over and return on Sunday evenings. This way, she would get to spend time with her mother and see my parents as well. All this while my wife was visiting our hometown. She never returned to tell me that she had seen any of my old friends or hers. She always sounded like the only people she saw were my family and her family, and it felt odd for someone who grew up in the same town with a dozen friends who still lived there. For almost a year, my wife continued to visit our hometown twice a month. Even when her mother recovered from her illness, my wife didn't stop visiting. She said she was drawn to our town and loved how she visited everyone, at least to stay connected to our family. When she said this, I should have suspected something fishy was going on, but I didn't have any reason to doubt my wife because I trusted her and didn't think she would betray me the way she did. By this time, we had been married for 2 years, and our bond had strengthened. 2 months before Christmas, my parents decided to renew their wedding vows because they had been married for 30 years and wanted to reignite their old love. As expected, my wife and I attended the party, and we arrived a day before to help with some things. The next day after the party, my wife suggested that we spend at least one more day with our families, mainly because it had been a long time since I had visited. I agreed, and we stayed for the small family after party. At the after party, my cousin, who had always been my rival and the favorite child of the house, was there too. Knowing I would stay, I invited some of my old friends to get wasted with me. Later that night, while my friends and I, my cousin, and a few other people were drinking and chatting about different unimportant things, my cousin got drunk and began to make a scene. From his childhood, he had always been a bragger around me. It was almost like he always wanted me or everyone to know he was doing better than me, even though he was born out of wedlock. Immediately, my cousin started making a scene. My friend and I laughed about an old memory at the top of our voices, and my cousin got attracted. Instead of continuing with his drama and blabbing, he turned in my direction and started to say things. He began abusing me and my marriage, and when I did not respond, he got pissed and began to tell everyone how he had been sleeping with my wife. The first time he mentioned sleeping with my wife, I thought he was only saying that to get to me. But when he mentioned how she'd come to our hometown on weekends and how they had fun together, I knew he wasn't lying. At this point, the only thing that felt right was to record him as he bragged, so I took out my phone and recorded him as he bragged and exposed his secret. My cousin even went as far as saying that he slept with my wife on purpose to show me that he could also have whatever I had. I was so disappointed in my wife when I heard everything, and I couldn't even hide the embarrassment. When it seemed like his bragging would not end, I was forced to leave everyone. As soon as I got into my parents' house, I met my wife talking to my parents, and I began to yell at her. Before I left my cousin and my friends, I had already sent the video to my wife, so she would know that I knew about her affair. But after she saw it, she told me to not believe anything my cousin said because he was drunk. I believed everything my cousin said because he wouldn't have talked about it if he did not sleep with my wife as he bragged. He would have simply bragged about something else, but not my wife. I was so angry that I confronted her in front of my parents, and after yelling and yelling, she admitted in tears that there were a couple of times she mistakenly slept with my cousin, the one person she knew I hated so much. My parents had to intervene and were so disappointed that my wife was cheating on me. Her mom, who was also in the room with my parents, was so disappointed in her, and she left the house in shame. I had also dropped the recording of my drunk cousin on our WhatsApp family group chat, and everyone had finally seen that he wasn't the good person they all thought he was. That night, I didn't sleep at home because I could not stand the shame and embarrassment, so I drove to a nearby motel. My parents and wife kept calling me the whole night, but I didn't take anybody's call. The following day, I texted my mom that I was returning to the town I lived in and left my wife there. She also came home later that evening, but I had packed my clothes and other valuables, and I left the house for her. When she called me that evening to ask where I was, I told her it was over between us, and that my lawyer would be the next person she would hear from. I wasn't ready to listen to her explanations, so I blocked her number and blocked her on all of our mutual social media platforms. Our divorce was difficult for me, but I went through with it. We are divorced now, and my family sees her differently now. My mom and her mom are still friends, but she isn't welcome to our house. I have learned a lesson, and whenever I see red flags in my future relationships, I will not try to justify them because a leopard never changes its spots. Anyways, 3 years have passed, and I have not been able to completely forget that night. It still haunts me in my sleep, and as for my cousin, there can never be any form of friendship between us because he is no different from an animal. Many things have changed in my family after everyone saw him brag in that video, and I'm pleased with the new way they treat him. OP, a leopard never changes its spots. Cheating spouses will always cheat, and like in your case, they might say it happened as a mistake, even when it happened several times. Your wife betrayed your trust, and that's unforgivable. She disgraced you, and you made the right choice by cutting her out of your life. I'm glad you didn't give her a third chance because you would be making a horrible mistake. As for your cousin, it's best to avoid him totally. He's not worthy to be called family. You have to forget about your wife and everything that happened. That's the only way you can move on, and I hope you do the right thing. Now for today's second story. I, 31 male, recently divorced my ex-wife, 28 female, because of her lies and infidelity. My wife and I first met in a shopping mall. I had gone to the mall to get some items since I shopped only twice a month. As I was about to leave the mall that day, my wife came to me and asked if I could look at her car, which had refused to turn on. While helping her check her car, I realized that her problem was minor, and I helped her fix it. Originally, I had no intentions of becoming friends with her or anything because I only wanted to help her and leave, but in the process of helping her fix her car, we had a great conversation, and we ended up exchanging contacts. After that day, we didn't see each other again until a week later. I had forgotten entirely about her, and if she had not called me again, things would not have gotten so serious between us. Long story short, my wife and I started going out on our free days, and as we got to know ourselves better, love happened. We dated for only a year and married afterward. Before my wife and I settled down, she told me about her previous relationship, and I told her about mine. According to my wife, her rich ex-boyfriend maltreated and physically abused her. They dated for 4 years. But in terms of taking care of her, giving her money and gifts, he was pretty generous with that. From what I understood, my wife claimed she had to leave her abusive ex-boyfriend because she was tired of being cheated on and abused. I understood her because I had a friend in an abusive relationship too, and I saw how hurt she was all the time. I even assured my wife that our marriage would be her safe haven, and I would never raise my hands on her, no matter how angry I would be, and I meant it. I had never hit a woman before and didn't plan on starting with her. Since my wife was already living with me from the 5th month of our relationship, being married was not so different, except for us wearing our wedding bands and the pictures we had decorated at home. For the first few months of our marriage, everything was so smooth. My wife showered me with so much love and made me feel like the only man in the world. Since the house I lived in was given to me by my late dad, we didn't need to pay rent. We only had to pay utility bills, groceries, and gas. Honestly, I was the one who took care of the bills. I earned enough money to take care of both of us, and I was comfortable doing that. I never asked her about her salary or what she did with her money. I felt it was my responsibility to take care of her and the bills since she was already used to that lifestyle. 1 year passed, and we were still living in harmony, except for a couple of issues with my work from the 10th month of our marriage. Something happened at the organization I worked at, and for a whole month, I wasn't paid. Not being paid affected a lot of things at home because I couldn't do the things I used to do before. Initially, when we realized at work that we wouldn't be paid for that month, I wasn't bothered because I believed my wife would take care of the bills at home until things returned to normal, but I was so wrong. That day, I went home to tell my wife I wasn't paid, thinking she would pacify me and take over things for a while, but she shocked me. She started being so dramatic and then made a fuse out of it. She asked me what we would do, and I told her to take care of the house until things were normal. Guess what, guys? My wife said she would only agree to help with the house if I agreed to pay interest on all the money she would spend. When she said so, I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She meant every word she said. Her response shocked me, considering everything I had done for her since we started dating until our marriage. Honestly, I would not have believed it if I had been told she would say something like that. Ultimately, I agreed to her terms, and she counted every penny she would spend and gave me her interest rate. As if paying interest and refunding her money was not enough, that same week, my wife's attitude towards me changed entirely. Before I had issues with my job, she used to be so clingy and would repeatedly profess her love to me, but once she started paying the bills at home, everything changed. She no longer allowed me to touch her, and she changed from the talkative she used to be to a very cold person. I noticed all these changes, and when I confronted her about it, she said it was her new mood, and that if I had any problem with it, I should deal with it. Even how she talked to me changed, and respect was gone. Everything happened so fast, and in a twinkle of an eye, I didn't know who my wife was anymore. To make things worse, the company I worked for had to lay off some people, and I had to go after getting my salary. When this happened, I didn't tell my wife about it because she was already making staying with her at home unbearable. I told my friends about it, and thankfully, one of them reached out to someone who had just opened a fancy restaurant, and I got a job there. I worked as a waiter for almost 2 months at this fancy restaurant and didn't tell my wife about it. The pay was smaller compared to my previous salary, but it was better than doing nothing and being insulted by the woman who used to tell me I was the air she breathed. As for the bills at home, after 2 months of her adding her insane interest rate to the money she spent, I had to stop that, and we started splitting 50-50. Even with us splitting the bills, our marriage did not go back to how it used to be, but I wasn't even bothered about that because my only focus was to keep applying for jobs until I got a better job than serving at the restaurant. Somehow, I believed my wife's respect would return after I got back to my old financial status. One day, I was at the restaurant trying to sort the orders of customers that just came in when I spotted my wife walking into the restaurant. When I saw her, my heart skipped because I thought she had gotten information that I was working there, but to my greatest surprise, she walked to a table where a man was already waiting for her, and they lip-locked each other. My heart broke instantly, and when I realized it was her ex-boyfriend, who she told me she had cut all contact with, I nearly peed in my pants. One of my coworkers working there before me saw the shock on my face and asked if everything was all right. It took me a few seconds to respond to him, and when I did, I told him about my wife and ex-boyfriend. He was also surprised and confused, but understood better when I told him my wife didn't know I was working there. The coworker that talked to me and I were close, so he devised a plan for me. After we agreed on the plan, he went to take their orders. The plan was he would go and take their order, and once their food was ready, I would go and serve them while he would record everything from behind. I did as we had planned. I took the food to my wife and her ex-boyfriend without breaking my stride. When she looked in my direction and saw me, her face turned pale, and she spat out the red wine she was drinking out of surprise. I ended up leaving the food in front of her and her ex-boyfriend, and while I took my time to do that, she literally froze and could not say a word. Later that day, she did not come back home. I knew she wouldn't, so I gleefully packed her stuff and left them outside. The next morning, she came to beg and give her usual cheater's line of "Baby, I can explain. It's not what you think." This was the longest sentence she had said to me in days, and if I had not seen her, she probably would have kept cheating on me. I felt generous with my words, so I told her to return to her rich ex-boyfriend and enjoy her toxic relationship. She didn't say much after that. She just packed her stuff and left. I even doubt her tears were real. Weeks later, we divorced, and everything ended between us. Luckily, 4 months after I worked at the restaurant, I landed a good job with a juicy offer. I even forgot to add that my coworker and I posted my wife's video online. We covered her boyfriend's face, but left hers for the world to see, and it went viral. I wouldn't like to be specific, but she's made it to the memes section, and each time I remember the look on her face on that video, it makes me laugh. I couldn't even cry over her. I moved on like nothing had happened because she had badly hurt and disrespected me in the past few months. And the two things I couldn't take from a woman were cheating and disrespect. I'm fine now, but I'm in no rush to be in a relationship because most women are horrible pretenders. They are so good at saying, "I'll be your ride or die," but they leave when something happens. OP, it is obvious your wife has been pretending from the beginning. She loved the life she had with you and the things you did for her. It's always heartbreaking to give your all to someone and work so hard to make them comfortable and happy, but the moment you need them, you realize you were in the relationship alone. You should be glad that you found out before you got your new job, or else you would have manipulated your soft heart again and taken advantage of your love. It's beautiful to hear that you have moved on. Enjoy your life and take your time before you get into any relationship. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.